And our word for today on this Wednesday after Epiphany, on this Wednesday, January the 8th, our word for today is fear. Fear is our word for today, and here to talk about it, the one, the only Deacon Dan Brahier. Good morning, Deacon Dan. We are ready for you to clean this mess up today, for goodness sake.
Yeah, good morning.
I'm going to do what I can. Happy New Year, by the way.
Happy New Year to you, brother.
Thank you. My wife and I actually had a conversation last week about this. How long can you continue to say Happy New Year to somebody before it's not appropriate anymore? You know, like it gets worn out after a week or so. But, you know, it's still January, so.
Yeah, it's still the,
so our word
in May and June, it's still the New Year, right?
Well, actually, that's true. That's true. I mean, technically, on December 31st is still the New Year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway. Our word for the day is fear. And I was reminded, my father was a police officer for 30 years and is retired, and he often reminded me the number one deterrent to crime is fear. But it's not fear, oddly enough, the studies seem to show it's not just a fear of punishment. It's a fear of somebody else finding out that you did something wrong. But it's this idea that I have some kind of a fear in me that is going to keep me from doing something. And we see that these references to fear throughout the Bible, the Old Testament a little bit more poignantly, like in Psalm 34, it says, "Fear the Lord, you his holy ones. Nothing is lacking to those who fear him." And Proverbs chapter 9 says, "The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord." And then, in contrast, the New Testament seems to say a little bit of the opposite. For example, Gabriel tells Mary not to be afraid. And the angels tell the shepherds not to fear. And in today's gospel, Jesus says, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." So it almost seems like to be a conflict. You know, like Old Testament, we see this idea of fearing God. In the New Testament, it's saying don't have any fear at all. So kind of, it seems like a paradox. I think what's going on there is really making sense of it depends on how we define the word fear. So when we talk about fear of the Lord, it doesn't necessarily mean, it can mean, but it doesn't necessarily mean to be afraid of God. Instead, it seems to refer to revering God, to be in awe of his power. So if we have this deep respect for the glory of God, then we are going to want to act appropriately and not to offend him. So if there's any fear at all, it would simply be having a fear that we might lose God's friendship or that we might break our relationship with him if we do something that he doesn't want us to do. So this idea of fear of the Lord is one of the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit, and it really refers to the idea of being in awe and developing a deep level of respect for God. Because God doesn't really want us to live in fear. He doesn't want us to be afraid of anything, including death. So in that context, we look at the first reading from today, which is from the first letter of John. And John says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. And so one who fears is not yet perfect in love." And the very next verse after that reading says, "We love because he loved us first." Which reminded me of, there's a song, it's not actually a song, but a kind of a talk that was given by the lead singer of the Christian group, Casting Crowns. And he put it this way. He says, "God doesn't love you because you're good. He loves you because he's good." You know, so that's kind of what that is all about, that we avoid doing things that will offend God because we're in awe of him. That's what it means to fear him. So St. John says if we love God, we'll respect him and do what pleases him, not out of fear of punishment, because we want to please him and the people around us. So in a sense, love does, in fact, drive out the fear. I was reminded of this really neat homily that Pope Benedict XVI gave. And this is what he said on it. He said, "The Holy Spirit overcomes fear. We know the disciples fled to the cenacle after the Master's arrest and remained there out of fear of suffering the same fate." And then he goes on to say, after Jesus' resurrection, this fear did not suddenly disappear. But when the Holy Spirit descended upon them at Pentecost, these men went out without fear and began to proclaim the good news of Christ crucified and risen. They had no fear because they felt they were in stronger hands. So where the Spirit of God enters, he chases out fear. So we don't fear God in terms of being afraid of Him, but we revere Him. We're in awe of Him, and that love drives out the fear.
And it's a great lesson for us, too, is, with the apostles, I mean, they're terrified, right, because of the rough seas, and they're seeing Him walk. But He says, take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. So you're right, that healthy fear of the Lord is very different from that terrified feeling of not being in control. Deacon Dan, thank you so much.
He's in our midst.
Yeah,
You're welcome. Thank
you. Have a great day.